My name is Ryan Ellis, and if you had asked me before that night at the Millstone Conservatory greenhouse, I would have said my marriage to Nora Pike was as steady as they come. Not perfect, no marriages, but balanced. We had a rhythm. I worked as a data engineer for a logistics company in Minneapolis, spending most of my time buried in databases and code reviews. Nora worked in partnership marketing for a large philanthropic foundation. She loved the networking, the constant people flow, the curated chaos of high-profile events. I liked the opposite, quiet, predictable systems that behaved if you handled them right. It's strange how one evening can rewrite your understanding of the last several years. The charity banquet at the greenhouse was supposed to be one of Nora's career highlights. Her team had been working on it for months. Tables dressed in green glass vases, orchids suspended in terrariums, warm amber lighting bouncing off the glass walls. The winter air outside pressed against the panes, and inside, hundreds of guests drifted through the humid space in formal wear, pretending they weren't sweating. I just returned from the bar with 2 champagne flutes when Nora's clutch, resting half open on the table beside me, buzzed against the glass tabletop. Out of habit more than suspicion, my eyes flicked to the phone screen. Meridian House, Suite 512 is ready, red heart, red heart. It took me a moment to process the combination of words. Meridian House didn't mean anything to me. At least not yet. But the phrasing wasn't asterisk mate, deliberate. Suite 512 wasn't your table or your reservation. It was a room number, and the heart emojis, 2 in a row, sat there like they were mocking me. The clutch was open enough that I could see the other item inside. A plastic keycard with a black and gold hourglass logo. Minimalist, expensive looking, the kind of thing designed to feel like a secret you were being let in on. Before I could decide what to do with what I'd just seen, Nora was at my side, smiling for someone across the room. She followed my gaze to the phone, and without even glancing flustered, she plucked it up, tapped the screen off and said, "Oh, that is part of the event theme. Meridian House is one of our partners for the campaign. They're doing this whole immersive marketing thing with fake notifications for VIP guests. Even the keycard is a prop. Cute, right?" Her tone was easy. Too easy. I might have believed her if the words hadn't come out rehearsed, or if she'd sounded even slightly surprised. But she slid the card back into her clutch without breaking eye contact, then looped her arm through mine. "Come on, they're doing photos," she said, already guiding me toward the small archway strung with fairy lights. The photographer was set up there, a practiced smile on his face as he adjusted the angle. Nora tilted her head toward me, holding out her hand to close the gap for what would be the perfect happy couple *T. At the last second, I noticed a figure to my left, a woman I recognized vaguely from Nora's introductions earlier, a corporate lawyer who'd been speaking on stage about compliance. I turned toward her instead, extending my hand for a quick greeting. The camera flash went off at exactly the wrong, or maybe exactly the right moment. In the resulting photo, I'm smiling politely at the lawyer, her hand in mine, while Nora stands beside me with her own hand frozen midair, fingers just slightly curled as if she'd been reaching for something that wasn't there. Within minutes, the image was uploaded to the Banquet's networking app, which guests use to exchange business details and connect. Notifications began popping up on my phone. People tagging me, commenting on the *T. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Nora glance at the screen of her own phone and press her lips together. It was a small fracture in the evening, but once you notice a crack, you can't unsee it. I might have let it go, chalked it up to my own awkward timing, if not for something I noticed about 20 minutes later. Nora was across the room, talking to a cluster of men in dark suits, all wearing the slightly inflated posture of people who know their job titles will silence most criticism. One of them, mid-50s, salt and pepper hair, the easy self-assurance of an executive who'd been in his seat a long time, shifted his jacket, and a small gold pin caught the light on his lapel. An hourglass, identical to the emblem on the keycard I'd seen in Nora's clutch. The sight landed heavier than I expected, a strange mix of recognition and unease. If the logo really was just part of the Banquet's marketing theme, why had I only seen it twice, once in her purse and once on his suit? Why wasn't it plastered on the banners, the programs, the event website? And if Meridian House really was just a partner, why did the name feel so deliberately absent from the official materials? For the rest of the night, my eyes kept scanning for it, on signage, on other guests. I saw it only once more, embossed faintly on the corner of a cocktail napkin being carried away by a waiter. Nora didn't bring up the notification again, and neither did I. We moved through the evening like the practiced couple we'd become, smiling for photos, exchanging pleasantries, playing our parts. But underneath it, my mind kept circling back to that first vibration of her phone and the way she had explained it away as though she'd known exactly what I might be thinking. I didn't yet know what Meridian House was, or why a man wearing its emblem had been speaking to my wife like they shared some kind of inside joke. But the image was lodged in my head, right alongside the photo now circulating through every attendee's phone. Nora's hand hovering in empty space, mine firmly clasping someone else's. At the time, it was just an odd moment, a social misfire. Later, it would become something else entirely. The thing about a moment like that, Nora's hand suspended in midair, my smile angled away, is that it doesn't end when the flash fades. It echoes. On the drive home, I kept replaying it, like tapping back 5 seconds on a podcast, trying to hear the off note that made the whole track feel wrong. Once the echo started, memory began lining up like files I'd shoved into a temp folder and forgotten to sort. Small things, each of them explainable in isolation. Together, they formed a shape I didn't like. First, the location services. For years, we'd shared ours without thinking. We weren't surveillance people. It was just convenience. Text me when you're close. I'll meet you on the corner. Around spring, Nora started toggling hers off. Sometimes it was a full blackout day. Battery saver, she'd say, waving the phone like a flag of truce. Other times the dot froze in one neighborhood for hours, then jumped across the map as if time had glitched and decided to catch up. She called those days work sessions. I started calling them holes. Weekends shifted, too. Nora had always been a weekday hurricane and a Saturday sleeper. But suddenly she was full of quick drop-ins and client coffees. Always downtown, always roughly the same grid of streets. She came back bright-eyed and oddly buoyant, like jet lag without the plane, and she smelled. Not like her perfume, but like someone else's. Something sharper, with citrus layered over powder. Once, when I grabbed her coat from the car, that scent rose up like a ghost from the lining. In June, I found a second badge in her desk at home, tucked under a stack of conference lanyards. No name, just that same hourglass emblem, black on matte white plastic, the crisp sort of minimalism that tries to make secrecy look like taste. I turned it over in my hand and called out, "New event." She didn't look up from her laptop. "Prop kit," she said. The design team mocked up a bunch. Didn't explain why the badge had weight to it, the kind of internal chip you feel when you press the center. It also didn't explain how it beeped softly when I held it near our NFC front lock. I didn't mention that part. I told myself I was being weird. Her playlists changed. This one is hard to defend as evidence, even in my head I know that, but it still lives in the folder. The artist skewed darker, nocturnal, songs built around heavy bass and sampled whispers. We used to share new tracks during dinner. Lately, she listened alone, volume low, phone face down. Her calendar grew vague. I used to tease her about naming meetings like clickbait, Q3 partnership win, you won't believe number 7. Now she blocked whole afternoons with labels like hold and window, sometimes with an emoji that meant nothing to me. The reminders popped up muted on her watch, the text blurring out when I glanced over. I told myself none of it added up because telling myself otherwise would require action, and action meant confrontation, and I am a systems guy. Systems resist panic. Then there were the expenses. I manage our household budget the way I manage a staging database. I don't touch production, but I watch the logs. On Nora's corporate card, line items appeared with tasteful euphemisms: MH Lounge, client activities, Meridian Hospitality, event hosting. We never once discussed a Meridian partnership in the months I heard her rehearse pitch decks at our kitchen counter. When I asked generally how the campaign was going, she kissed my cheek and said, "You'll see at the gala." like a magician patting a pocket. Rideshare receipts synced to our shared folder like obedient birds. Most landed near the foundation offices, the airport, donor dinners. A handful fluttered into the same corner of that club district, the timestamps forming a neat little barcode. Friday, 7:42 p.m. Drop-off. Saturday, 1:18 a.m. Pickup. I almost convinced myself it was a venue cluster. 3 restaurants share an alley, that kind of thing, until I opened Street View and saw a parking garage with an hourglass etched discreetly into the metal panel above the ramp. More tactile things. I'd vacuum the car and find a bobby pin that didn't match the ones Nora used, a different finish, a different shape. Lip balm rolled under the passenger seat with a brand I didn't recognize. Nothing damning by itself. Anyone could have dropped them. She could have borrowed from a friend, but together they hummed. A low frequency you feel more than hear. Her messages, too. She'd always had group chats that sounded like confetti cannons. Pings of friends planning shows, memes, half-formed dinner plans. Over the summer, a new silence took its place. Notifications still lit her phone, but they arrived as banners that evaporated before I could read them. Then nothing at all. Once, while we were watching a show, a thread blinked open on her screen and then vanished, replaced by a notice I hadn't seen before. This conversation is set to delete. She flipped the phone over and tucked it beneath her thigh like it was just another remote. She started using a second browser profile, too. Again, nothing dramatic, just a new avatar with a neutral gray circle. I noticed it because she asked me to airplay a video and the toolbar mirrored onto the TV for a second. The bookmarks were bare, but the history was cleaner than a demo machine. The jewelry was the most on the nose, and maybe because of that, the easiest to minimize. One morning in July, she fastened a pendant I'd never seen around her wrist. A slender gold charm shaped like an hourglass, empty center. No sand, just a frame. Gift, she said when I noticed. One of our partners is doing a gifting suite. I'm testing the quality. She left it on for days even when she slept. When I brushed my fingers over it in bed, she covered my hand the way you do with something fragile, then rolled away. A new keycard sleeve appeared in the catch-all by the door. Cream paper, debossed with that same hourglass. Pretty, I said, aiming for casual. It's from a mood board, she answered, already sliding it into her tote. I started cataloging, not in a spreadsheet, though it would have been satisfying, but in the back of my skull where habit lives. I told myself I was only keeping track so I wouldn't overreact. A system of record, not a trigger. The night after the banquet, the record kept itself. An email slid into our shared backup mailbox at 12:11 a.m. The kind of automated invoice that slips past filters because it looks boring. Subject line: Meridian House, Suite 512, extended stay. The body listed incidentals, 2 breakfasts, late checkout. Whoever coded the template didn't account for spouses who maintain shared archives out of an abundance of practicality. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed and brightened twice. Then I went hunting through the other logs I pretend I don't keep. Parking garage statements, access fobs from our building, calendar holds, the photo gallery from the Banquet app. The pieces slid into their grooves with the steady indifference of gravity. In one photo, he's escorting Nora toward a bank of private elevators, the pendant visible at her wrist like a small, ringing bell. Looking back, I wish I could say the truth arrived like a thunderclap. Didn't. It arrived like drizzle, then a leak, then the steady tap of water you can't unhear inside your walls. I lay awake listening to it and thought about how often we call things themes, when what we mean is alibis. I thought about the hourglass logo and what it promises: time, but contained, measured, owned by whoever flips it. Memory is good at retrofitting. You give it one clear beam and it rebuilds a whole house around the light. By dawn, I could walk through every room. The night after the banquet, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to the faint hum of traffic beyond the apartment, the occasional clink of the radiator, the uneven rhythm of Nora's breathing beside me. I'd kept my distance in bed, close enough that she wouldn't notice, far enough that I could breathe without catching her perfume. I kept seeing the flash of the hourglass pin on that executive's lapel, the way it seemed to tilt toward her as they spoke. The notification, the keycard, her rehearsed dismissal. It was all sitting too neatly in the same mental folder. At 12:11 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I would have ignored it. This time, I rolled over and checked. An email had dropped into our shared backup mailbox. One we kept for receipts and warranty records, the kind of practical paper trail you forget exists until you need it. The subject line was short: Meridian House, Suite 512. Extended stay. No greeting, no branding flourish. Just the mechanical language of an invoice. 2 breakfasts, late checkout, parking validation. A charge for guest convenience. A note in the corner. Your preferred suite has been prepared to your specifications. Whoever designed the email template clearly assumed their clients didn't need to be sold. They already belonged. I stared at the screen so long it dimmed and brightened twice. Suite 512. Same number as the notification at the banquet. I didn't delete it. I didn't forward it. I let it sit there, await on the server, and open the other records I wasn't supposed to have memorized. Our building's parking log showed her car entering at 9:14 p.m., just after we'd left the banquet, exiting again at 9:31. A quick stop to drop me off, I thought, until I saw the second set of logs from the Meridian House garage. Hers, time-stamped 9:58. Then, less than 2 minutes later, a second entry. The senior executive sedan, plates I recognized from donor dinners. Their exit times matched almost to the second, 2:43 a.m. A stagger so small it felt like choreography. I told myself there could be reasons. Shared meetings, overlapping schedules, mutual friends. I told myself this the way you tell yourself a noise in the dark is just the house settling. But the house was not settling. I opened the Banquet's networking app. The official photo gallery had been updated while we slept. Hundreds of images tagged and cross-referenced. In one, Nora is in motion, head turned toward someone just outside the frame, a small, private smile on her lips. Her right hand is brushing a pendant at her wrist, the hourglass charm. Beside her, the executive leans subtly toward the bank of elevators at the far wall. His body angled like an arrow. I scrolled past it, then back. The elevators were set into a corner most guests wouldn't notice, partially hidden by a divider wall wrapped in ivy. I remembered them only because the corporate lawyer from earlier had mentioned them in passing. Private access to the rooftop suites. My stomach nodded. The evidence wasn't one thing, it was the way the pieces slid into place without friction. The email, the parking logs, the pendant, the photograph. None of them proved intent alone. Together, they formed something else. The outline of a pattern too precise to be coincidence. I went further back in the app's gallery, looking for stray sh*TS from the greenhouse's mezzanine. In one frame, blurred in the background behind a group of donors, I caught the glint of the hourglass pendant again, this time at the edge of the elevator doors. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at him. By then my pulse was so loud in my ears I almost didn't hear the soft ping of another notification. A rideshare receipt had synced to our shared folder. Time-stamped just after the garage exit, destination home. The pickup point? The Meridian House service entrance. I sat back, staring at the mosaic I'd assembled. The pieces were quiet, factual, unembellished. They didn't accuse. They didn't speculate. They simply existed, their weight pressing equally on every part of me. For months, I'd been tracking anomalies like a background process, telling myself it was nothing. But anomalies only look harmless until the system reveals what they belong to. And this was the moment where it all stopped being a suspicion and became a certainty. I didn't wake her. I didn't throw the phone down on the bed and demand an explanation. I lay back, my eyes fixed on the faint shadow of the hourglass pendant against the wall where her jewelry hung, and I understood that whatever story we'd been telling ourselves about our marriage, it had already ended somewhere between a greenhouse and Suite 512. I didn't make a scene. I didn't rehearse speeches, didn't sharpen questions like knives, didn't wait for a perfect timing that would never arrive. The decision landed in me cleanly, like a switch thrown in a server room. Lights out on the old script. I slid from the bed as carefully as if the floor were water. Nora exhaled and rolled toward the warm space I left behind. For a second I thought she might wake and grip my wrist the way she does when a bad dream catches her. She didn't. The apartment looked different in that hour, grainy and overexposed. The hallway photos, road trips, wedding, a lopsided selfie under a rain tarp, watched me pass like witnesses who knew better than to speak. In the living room, I paused long enough to feel the soft thud of my heart catching up with my feet. This wasn't panic. It was clarity, the kind that makes your whole body quiet. There were no notes to write and no drawers to rifle. I already knew what I would take. The documents, my passport, the laptop and external drives, 2 changes of clothes, running shoes. I put them into the small carry-on we use when we visit Nora's mother, the one with a tiny scuff shaped like a crescent moon. Zippers sounded louder than they should have. I slowed my hands until they matched the rhythm of the building's heat clicks. I moved through the rooms like a tech doing decommission. Power down, coil the cord, leave the station neat. In the bathroom, a single strand of Nora's hair clung to the mirror. I thought about the hourglass pin on his lapel and decided I didn't need to think about anything else. The invoice was still open on my phone, its numbers neutral and unashamed. Suite 512. Late checkout. 2 breakfasts. It sat there like a door I wasn't going to walk through. Keys, wallet, phone. I left my wedding band where it already was, on my finger. The gesture of removing it felt theatrical, and I was done with theater. Quiet was the point. At the front door I hesitated, not from doubt, but from procedure. I turned back to the living room and closed the laptop, set it in the middle of the table, screen facing the couch. When morning came, I wanted the first thing she saw to be our furniture, still arranged exactly as she left it. No drama, no overturned picture frames, no message carved into the grain of the dining table. Just absence, clean as a vacancy sign. Outside, Minneapolis had gone to glass. Streetlights ran along the river like a trail of coins. I didn't check the time. I didn't need to. I kept my phone off and let the car's engine fill the quiet with a domestic hum. The night was the kind that remembers every tire and keeps the record. So I drove slowly, letting each turn settle. I passed the conservatory's black silhouette, its greenhouse panes reflecting other people's parties, and I felt the same calm I do after a clean deploy. The system is stable, the logs are readable, the rollback is me. I didn't plan where to go. I just knew I couldn't stay. I steered toward the river, then downtown, then a loop I've run 100 times in daylight. The city at that hour looks like it's holding its breath. I pulled into a 24-hour lot and K** led the lights. For a long time I didn't move. I thought about the photo already earning its own life in the Banquet app. Nora's hand suspended, my palm wrapped around the corporate lawyers. I hadn't meant to send a message, but the image had decided to become one anyway. People talk about sleeping on it like rest will sand down the edges of a decision. I already knew sleep would do the opposite. So I sat there and let the decision harden. When the shiver came, I reached into the suitcase and pulled out the gray hoodie I wear when I code late. It smelled like detergent and cinnamon from the bakery downstairs. I put it on and felt human again. Home wasn't far, but going back would mean becoming the person who leaves and then unleaves, who says, "I was just upset," and rebuilds a set that's already been struck. I pictured the hourglass pendant against Nora's wrist. Time but rationed. I didn't want rationed. I wanted air. I checked into a small hotel a few blocks from the river, the kind favored by business travelers who never learn the city they sleep in. The lobby was mostly carpet and polite lamps. The clerk slid a key across the counter and told me about breakfast hours, which felt like a joke the universe wrote just for me. I nodded, carried the suitcase up, and put it against the wall as if it might wake something if I let it fall. I didn't text anyone. Not my brother, not my manager, not the friend who would be awake and would tell me to come over. I brushed my teeth with a disposable brush and lay on the bed fully dressed. My body tried to inventory the last details. Did you pack your charger? Did you lock the door? And then ran out of tasks and finally stilled. Sunlight arrived like a software update. Not dramatic, but everything worked a little differently. I powered on my phone. Notifications stacked themselves into categories. First, the small ones. Calendar reminders, shipping alerts, a weather warning about slick bridges. Then the ones that cared about narrative. A text from Nora at 6:07 a.m. Where are you? Another at 6:13. Ryan, this isn't funny. At 6:29. Call me. We need to talk. I didn't answer. Email shifted from personal to institutional as the morning advanced. An internal digest from the foundation landed in my inbox, the tidy kind of recap Nora's team sends after big events. Sponsorship tallies, pledges secured, press mentions drafted like trophies. In the curated highlights was the photograph from the archway. Nora reaching toward me, my hand clasped instead with the lawyer's. Above it, the caption read, "An unforgettable night at Millstone Conservatory." Unforgettable is one word for it. I turned off push notifications. The phone became a blank object again, a small slab that did only what I asked. I booked 2 weeks off with my manager via email, family matter, urgent, I'll transition the pipelines today, and then signed out of every messaging app one normally haunt. Silence wasn't punishment. It was a boundary I could actually enforce. By noon, my absence had started to exist in other people's mouths. A colleague texted, "Everything okay?" Saw the app LOL. Another, "If you need a couch," the lawyer from the Banquet, Rachel, sent a short message that managed to be both professional and kind. "If you ever need to talk as an independent party, here's my number." I stared at it and did nothing. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed a day where I didn't explain myself. I drove back to the apartment only once, mid-afternoon, while I knew Nora would be locked in meetings. I parked, rode the elevator up, and entered the quiet like a museum guard. I took the rest of my essentials. Backup drives, the running watch, a book I'd been pretending to read for months, and left the space exactly as I'd found it. No sticky notes, no ultimatums. On the way out, I considered leaving the key on the console table, but practicality won. Kept it. Leaving the door entirely was enough ceremony for one day. By evening, the auction results and press clippings had bloomed into lots of little narratives. Invitations to clarify a misunderstanding began to trickle in, as if a misunderstanding could generate invoices and synchronized exits and a pendant that had never belonged to us. I ignored the invitations. I also ignored the urge to surveil. If I was going to leave, I had to trust the leaving. I ended the day where I'd started it, in quiet. Only this time the quiet had changed. It wasn't the silence you get when someone refuses to answer a question. It was the quiet of a room after power down, when all the fans spin to a stop and you can finally hear yourself think. The script I'd been reciting didn't need a final line. It needed a cut to black. So I gave it one, and the screen went dark, and for the first time in months, I felt the relief of no longer performing. The first week tasted like metal. I could function, shower, dress, run my automations, but everything had that tinfoil edge that makes coffee taste wrong. I slept at the small hotel, ran along the river at dawn, and avoided any place that knew our names in the same sentence. When people texted, "Are you okay?" I treated it like a yes/no checkbox and tapped nothing at all. Nora tried a rotation of approaches. Urgency, calm, then curated concern. The first pings were alarms. "Where are you? Call me now." Then the PR voice from her decks. "We should clarify a misunderstanding." By midweek, she sent a longer note about stress and burnout. She called the Meridian thing industry theater, a brand experiment that only looked private. The push notification was a stunt, the invoice a glitch, the pendant a gift bag. Every sentence arrived sanded and smooth, like it had been through legal before it reached me. I didn't answer. Silence isn't revenge. It's a boundary with a lock on it. At work, I filed the leave request and assigned my pipelines to a teammate. I wrote notes like an evacuation plan. Here's where the caches leak. Here's the cron that lies. Here's what to do if the vendor's API goes to sleep at 2 a.m. Then I closed my laptop and didn't open it for a day. When I did, it was for a different kind of work. The photograph from the banquet had grown legs. In the event app, it picked up comments, then captions, then a meme format in someone's private channel. Suspended hand versus handshake. I watched it become shorthand for an evening I had already left. People read into it whatever they needed. I wasn't there to offer footnotes. 2 letters found me at the hotel, forwarded from our building by a clerk who didn't ask questions. The first was from Nora, handwriting small and careful, like neat stitches trying to close a cut. She called my distance worrying, framed the suite as a client courtesy, and quoted our vows the way you'd read minutes into a meeting. The second envelope was official cream paper with the foundation's crest. HR language. It asked me to return any materials that may create confusion around donor engagement. I had nothing but the kind of facts organizations never love. Timestamps, logs, photos, and silence. I took my notebook to the bakery downstairs and sketched the timeline anyway, not out of pettiness, but protection. I listed what existed: the hotel invoice in the shared mailbox, the parking logs with sequential entries, the gallery images, public to anyone with event access, the nameless hourglass badge, the corporate card charges annotated as client activities, rideshare receipts, calendar blocks, the pendant. None of it was theory. All of it was time-stamped and boring, which is the best kind of truth. That's when Rachel, the corporate lawyer from the photograph, texted again. Not a hey or a we should talk, but a sentence shaped like a lifeline. If you want help structuring this without letting it eat you, I consult independently. I met her in a quiet lobby where plants pretended to be trees and the couches pretended to be soft. She wasn't interested in gossip. She was interested in guardrails. We separate personal from corporate, she said. You're not filing a complaint about heartbreak. You're creating a record that stands if anyone tries to use your silence against you. She listed what mattered legally and what only mattered emotionally. It was oddly merciful. I didn't have to mash the two together. We built a folder system so clean even my engineer brain exhaled. Evidence/primary. Receipts, logs, **TS with visible timestamps. Evidence/context. Calendar notes and anonymized summaries of prior behavior. Narrative/personal. A document that never left my drive. If you need to say the human part out loud, say it there, Rachel said. But not to them. I asked the question, pacing my skull since the banquet. How do I keep this from turning into a circus? She smiled the way lawyers do when the honest answer isn't comforting. You can't control the crowd, she said. You can control your microphone. Nora escalated. She copied me on emails to mutual friends about Ryan's sudden withdrawal, called it a mental health spiral, suggested a sabbatical, floated compassionate leave. The vocabulary of care as a lever. I read it and felt steady. I wasn't spiraling. I was stepping off a carousel. The world still blurred, but for different reasons. The Foundation's compliance team, apparently awake now that the hourglass pin kept showing up on the wrong lapels, reached out through Rachel. They asked for a brief call to understand peripheral facts. I agreed on 2 conditions. Keep my personal life out of their notes, and keep everything I provided inside the lane of materials accessible to event attendees. They accepted. On the call I said almost nothing. Rachel steered. She cited the public gallery, the invoice in our shared mailbox, and the garage entries, available to the drivers who paid them. No theories, just doors and times. Afterward, I walked the river path and tried to remember life without triangulating signals. A heron lifted off the bank like a slow idea. I bought a used bike from a shop that fixes what people abandon. The owner showed me how to true a wheel with patience and a clothespin. In the afternoons, I helped him emboss titles onto old books for customers who still like their names in gold. Glue, pressure, release. There's a rhythm to restoration when you accept the seam will always be there. Letters kept arriving, each asking me to adopt a new angle on the same geometry. The story tried to recast itself as noble error. A prop misunderstood, a notification misfired, an emblem mistaken for club merch. I'd read a paragraph, drop it in a folder labeled claims, and go back to the only map that made sense. Dates, times, doors, exits. Unexpected allies were quiet. A colleague sent a **T of the apps index with a simple FYI. A donor introduced by Nora months ago messaged, "Be gentle with yourself. Institutions are clumsy with truth." The bike shop owner, who knew none of it, handed me a sandwich and said, You look like a guy who forgets to eat while he's rebuilding. By the end of the second week, Rachel had tuned my stack of facts into a packet. Not an accusation, not a manifesto, just a catalog prepared in case the story turned predatory. Now you can breathe, she said, because you're not holding it in your hands anymore. Breathing felt like an unfamiliar app at first, but I reinstalled it. I ran farther along the river. I slept better in the hotel's anonymous sheets than I had at home in months. When I woke, I didn't reach for her side of the bed by reflex. The emptiness had shape now, and the shape was mine. On Saturday, I walked past the conservatory where the gala glow had lived. In daylight, it was only glass and steel condensation tracing loops. A tour group clustered near a plaque. No one knew anything about a photograph of a suspended hand. The world had moved on. I took a breath that reached the bottom of my ribs. Then another. If the first week tasted like metal, the second tasted like paper and ink, like the edges of a new notebook. I wasn't finished with anything yet, but I had a place to write that wasn't a defensive wall. That counted as unexpected. That counted as hope.